The insult landed like a dropped plate in a quiet room, sharp and echoing, the kind of sound that makes everyone freeze even if they pretend not to hear it. In a crowded downtown restaurant where soft jazz usually smoothed over the rough edges of the city, one cold moment cut through the warmth and exposed something raw and painful. A powerful man in an expensive suit looked at a young waitress as if she were invisible and worthless at the same time, and the way her shoulders tightened told a deeper story than any words ever could. Before the night was over, that single moment of cruelty would collide with an act of unexpected kindness that would change several lives forever. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and quiet heroes who don't need applause, take a moment right now to like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that remind us what really matters. The CEO's name was Jonathan Reed, a well-known figure in Chicago's business world, famous for turning struggling companies into ruthless profit machines. He had built his empire with discipline, distance, and a belief that emotions were weaknesses. That night, he sat alone at a corner table, scrolling through emails, barely noticing the restaurant around him except when service failed to meet his impossible standards. To him, the restaurant was just another transaction, another place where efficiency mattered more than humanity. When the waitress made a small mistake with his order, his reaction was swift and humiliating, delivered loudly enough to remind everyone nearby of the invisible line between power and poverty. The waitress was Emily Carter, 24 years old, raised in a small Ohio town where faith, hard work, and hope were stitched into everyday life. She had moved to Chicago chasing the simple dream of stability, not luxury, just a place where she could breathe without fear. Her smile at work had become a habit of survival, something she wore even when her feet ached and her heart felt heavy. Few people in that restaurant knew that Emily's life outside those walls was unraveling. Her mother had passed away 2 years earlier, leaving behind a modest house and a mountain of unpaid bills. The mortgage hung over Emily like a storm cloud, threatening to wash away the last physical piece of her family. When Jonathan Reed dismissed her with a cutting look and a cruel tone, Emily felt that familiar burn behind her eyes, the one she had learned to swallow down since childhood. She nodded, apologized again, and walked away, her hands trembling as she reached the service station. It was not the first time she had been treated like she did not matter, but each time left a new crack inside her, a reminder that dignity could be fragile when money decided your worth. At the table near the window sat another man who noticed everything but said nothing. His name was Michael Thompson, a single father in his late 30s with tired eyes and a calm presence that came from years of responsibility. He worked as a building inspector for the city, a steady job that paid the bills, but never more than that. Across from him sat his 8-year-old daughter, Grace, coloring quietly and humming to herself. Michael had learned to observe people carefully since becoming a widower, reading rooms the way he read blueprints, noticing stress fractures others missed. Michael's wife had died 3 years earlier after a short battle with cancer, leaving him to raise Grace alone. Faith had carried him through the darkest nights, along with the promise he made to his daughter that their life would still be full of love and meaning. Money had been tight ever since medical bills drained their savings, but Michael believed deeply that what they lacked in wealth, they made up for in compassion. That belief was tested daily, especially in a city that rewarded ambition more than empathy. When Michael saw Emily retreat from Jonathan Reed's table, her face pale and her eyes glassy, something stirred inside him. He recognized the look, the same one he saw in the mirror during the months after his wife passed, when he felt small and unseen by the world. Grace noticed it too, tugging lightly at his sleeve, her innocent awareness sharper than most adults. Michael rested his hand on hers, silently promising himself he would not ignore what he had just witnessed. Emily tried to steady herself in the kitchen, breathing slowly and reminding herself that she needed this job. Rent was due. The mortgage company had called again that morning. Another late payment meant foreclosure proceedings would begin within weeks. She felt trapped between grief and responsibility, loving a home she might soon lose, and working endless shifts that never seemed to catch her up. She whispered a prayer under her breath, asking for strength, not rescue, because she had stopped believing rescue was possible. Jonathan Reed, meanwhile, returned to his phone, satisfied that he had reasserted control over a situation that annoyed him. He had grown up poor himself, a fact he rarely shared, believing that survival meant hardening your heart. Somewhere along the way, he had confused success with superiority, forgetting the fear and hunger that once shaped him. The waitress was just another reminder of a past he preferred to erase. As the evening wore on, Michael finished his modest meal, chatting softly with Grace about her day at school. He watched Emily continue her shift, smiling through exhaustion, carrying plates heavier than her spirit. Something inside him made a decision before his mind fully caught up. He remembered the church sermons about loving your neighbor, about generosity that expected nothing in return. He also remembered nights when strangers had shown him kindness after his wife's funeral, meals left anonymously on his doorstep, envelopes with grocery money slipped under his door. Those moments had not saved him, but they had kept him standing. When Michael asked to speak to the manager, Emily felt a flicker of fear, assuming another complaint was coming. Instead, she watched from a distance as Michael spoke calmly, his posture respectful, his tone gentle. The manager nodded, surprised but attentive. Emily had no idea that Michael was asking about the employee hardship fund the restaurant quietly maintained, or that he was inquiring whether the waitress with the brown hair had a way to receive help privately. Michael did not want recognition. He did not want thanks. He wanted only to do something real in a world that often felt performative and hollow. Using a combination of his savings and a small inheritance his wife had left behind for emergencies, he made a decision that terrified him and steadied him at the same time. He asked the manager to find out exactly how much Emily owed on her mortgage and whether it could be paid directly, anonymously. When Emily was called into the office later that night, she expected bad news. Her hands shook as she stood there, exhaustion pressing down on her chest. Instead, she was told that her mortgage had been paid in full, that the funds had been transferred quietly, and that there was no mistake. For a moment, her mind refused to process the words. Then reality crashed in, heavy and overwhelming, and she sank into a chair, covering her face as years of fear poured out in silent tears. She asked who had done this, but the answer was gentle and firm. It was someone who believed in her, someone who wanted nothing in return. Michael and Grace had already left the restaurant by then, walking into the cool night air, hand in hand. Grace skipped along the sidewalk, unaware of the full weight of what her father had done, but sensing that something important had happened. Michael felt fear creep in as he thought about his bank balance, about future uncertainties, but he also felt lighter than he had in years. He had chosen love over security, faith over fear, and that choice filled a quiet space inside him that money never could. Jonathan Reed learned about the incident the next day through a passing comment from a colleague who had been dining at the same restaurant. The story unsettled him more than he expected. He replayed the scene in his mind, the waitress's face, the way he had spoken to her. For the first time in a long while, he felt something uncomfortable and sharp, something that did not fit neatly into his controlled world. Guilt followed him into meetings and lingered long after the day ended. Emily returned to the restaurant the following week transformed, not by wealth, but by relief. The weight she had carried for so long was gone, replaced by a fragile but growing sense of hope. She worked with renewed energy, her smile no longer forced. She began saving, planning, dreaming again. She also started volunteering at her church, determined to pass on the kindness she had received, believing now that miracles could come through ordinary people. Michael never told his story publicly. He continued inspecting buildings, packing lunches for Grace, attending church on Sundays. But something in him had changed too. He felt closer to his late wife, as if honoring the life they shared meant continuing to love boldly. Grace grew up watching her father choose compassion again and again, learning lessons no classroom could teach. If this story has touched your heart, please take a moment to engage with this video. Your likes, shares, and comments help stories of hope reach people who desperately need them.